7 prisoners who survived ADX Florence. Their chilling stories, the men who walked out broken. If you think you've heard every dark prison story on the internet, think again. What you're about to hear is the kind of truth most documentaries avoid. If you make it to the end of this series, hit subscribe because this one goes places no camera has ever been allowed to go. The nightmare began on a cold January morning in the Rockies, long before the world ever heard the name ADX Florence. Snow hid the razor wire fences. Wind carved across the concrete compound like a blade. And deep inside a steel cell barely bigger than a bathroom, a man named Marcus Ellery stared at the door slit where breakfast would be pushed through. He hadn't spoken to another human in 6 days. Ellery wasn't the first and he wasn't the worst. He was one of 7. 7 inmates who, over the years, had been transferred through the bowels of the United States' most secure federal prison. Men who survived ADX Florence long enough for their stories to leak out. Smuggled letters, guarded phone calls, desperate fragments of memory. Every one of them described the same thing. A place designed not to punish the body but to fracture the human mind. The case that exposed them all began when a Deputy Marshal, Aaron Calder, stumbled across a troubling pattern while reviewing old inmate mental health files. Names erased. Diagnoses missing. Logs edited. And one chilling constant. Every inmate who cracked inside ADX had interacted with the same unit supervisor in their final weeks. Calder requested access to the files. Within 48 hours she received a denial stamped with a single line, operational security risk. But the problem was bigger than a stack of redacted reports. It broke open when a former inmate, Rafael Mendez, collapsed outside a halfway house in Denver only 10 days after his release. He whispered to paramedics that the walls followed him. When investigators attempted to interview him, he refused to speak. He only repeated 2 words, 7th survivor. Calder pulled the files by force through a federal subpoena. Inside the sealed folders, she found the 7 names that would change her career and unravel one of the government's most secretive stories. Marcus Ellery. Rafael Mendez. A smuggler named Noel Hart. A hacker turned informant, Victor Hale. A silent inmate known only as Reed Unit 3. And 2 more whose identities were wiped so clean it was as if they never existed. The disturbing part wasn't that they'd all survived ADX. It was what linked them afterward. The hallucinations. The paranoia. The identical phrases in their medical evaluations, written months apart by different staff. Each inmate described hearing faint clicks in their cells at night, like someone was tapping on the vents. Each complained of lights flickering in patterns. And each reported the same recurring nightmare. A dark corridor where footsteps followed but never caught up. Calder realized this wasn't coincidence. Something inside ADX Florence was happening to these men, something designed, controlled, and buried. The real break came when she received a coded letter from Hale. It was mailed from a psychiatric facility in Oregon where he'd been transferred after suffering what doctors called an acute psychotic break. The letter contained only 4 lines, each more unsettling than the last. Not madness. Not imagination. They monitored us. Find the basement. Calder drove straight to Florence with her badge, but security denied her entry. No warrant, no entry. She stood outside the frost-covered walls and realized she was missing one critical piece: legal authority. But she wasn't ready to give up. Late that night, while reviewing Hale's letter again, she noticed something. The ink on the page wasn't uniform. Under angled light, tiny indentations traced beneath the visible words. Someone had pressed hard enough for a message to hide beneath the message. She shaded it lightly with a pencil. A new sentence emerged. Don't trust the warden. Calder froze. Because the warden of ADX Florence wasn't just any administrator. He had directed the prison's special security program, the one that controlled the most isolated inmates. And if Hale was right, everything they thought they knew about ADX was wrong. But the real shock came the next morning, when Calder opened her door and found a plain envelope on her porch. No address. No stamp. Only a typed message inside. If you keep digging, you won't survive the basement either. She wasn't supposed to know who left it. But she did. It was signed with a single name. Reed. The 6th survivor. And the one who was never supposed to be found. The basement they swore didn't exist. Calder read the name again, tracing the single word like it might disappear beneath her fingertips. Reed. The 6th survivor. Official records insisted he died inside ADX Florence years earlier. No autopsy. No burial location. Just a single sentence in a federal archive. Case closed due to inmate death. But now he was leaving warnings on her doorstep. meant one thing. Someone had lied, and not just on paper. Calder contacted her only reliable ally inside the bureau, Special Agent Daniel Mercer, a man known as much for bending rules as solving cases. When she showed him the letter, he didn't argue, didn't question, didn't hesitate. He simply said, "If Reed is alive, then everything they told us was a cover." They sat down in a quiet federal office after hours, files spread across the table. Mercer flipped through each inmate's records, scanning the same disturbing pattern. All 7 men had spent time in C-Unit, ADX's most restricted tier, before their psychological collapses. The unit was officially reserved for inmates too dangerous, too unpredictable, or too high profile to mix with anyone else. But Calder noticed something no one else had bothered to question. Every inmate entered C-Unit. Not a single one left the same. 2 ended up dead. 3 descended into psychosis. 1 vanished entirely, Reed. And the 7th survivor was the man whose letter first cracked the case open. Victor Hale. Calder suspected the truth wasn't in the cells. It was below them. She pulled up architectural plans from when ADX was built in the 1990s. On paper it was straightforward. 3 main housing blocks, administrative towers, a rec yard, medical wing. But then Mercer pointed at something. A blank square beneath C-Unit. No labels. No utility designations. Just an empty space the size of an aircraft hangar. "Basements don't show up blank on government blueprints," he said. "You intentionally leave out what you don't want discovered." Calder nodded. "The question is, what's inside?" Before they could plan their next move, Calder's phone buzzed. It was a text from an unknown number. No greeting. No signature. "Tonight. 11:15. Gate 3. Come alone." Mercer leaned in. "Do not go alone." "I'm not," she replied. "You're coming whether they like it or not." The road to ADX Florence was pitch black and silent. Not the kind of silence that feels peaceful. The kind that feels staged. Manufactured. As if the entire world was holding its breath. Fog rolled low across the gravel as Calder and Mercer approached the perimeter. The prison loomed like a monolith, its concrete walls absorbing every hint of moonlight. Gate 3 was supposed to be used for maintenance vehicles only, rarely manned, almost never checked. But tonight a figure stood waiting. But up. Hands buried in pockets. When Calder stepped out of the car, the figure lifted his chin slightly. It was Reed. Or what was left of him. He looked thinner than his known photos, his eyes hollow like someone who'd spent years convincing himself shadows weren't watching him. He scanned the area before speaking, voice low enough that even the wind couldn't catch it. "They're monitoring this place right now," Reed said. "You have less than 10 minutes. Mercer stepped forward. "What's in the basement?" Reed shook his head. "You don't understand. The basement isn't a place. It's a program." Calder exchanged a glance with Mercer. "Explain." "They isolate you," Reed whispered. "Not to break you, but to study you. Patterns, tolerance, psychological thresholds. They watch through cameras so small you think you're imagining the glints in the walls." "Why?" Calder asked. Reed's gaze hardened. "Because ADX wasn't built to hold the worst men. It was built to test what can be done to them." A silence settled over the trio. Cold, heavy, frighteningly real. Reed reached into his jacket and handed Calder a flash drive. "Everything I remember. Everything they forced us through. It's not complete, but it's enough to get you inside with a warrant." Calder took it. "Come with us. You need protection." Reed backed away. "You can't protect me. They know I'm here. They always know." Before Calder could react, headlights swept across the fence line from inside the compound, patrol guards moving unexpectedly fast. Reed's eyes widened. "Go. Now." He turned and vanished into the fog as if swallowed by it. Calder and Mercer sprinted back to the car. As the engine roared to life, Calder couldn't shake the question burning in her mind. If Reed had been declared dead years ago, then who inside that prison had signed off on his death certificate? And why? But the true shock came 20 minutes later when they reached Mercer's office and plugged in the flash drive. The files were encrypted but intact. Dozens of documents. Several date-stamped logs. A hidden video folder. The first video autoplayed. It showed a cell. A metal bed. A man rocking back and forth. The date stamp. Reed Unit 3, C-Unit basement feed. The basement feed. The place that officially didn't exist. But the last frame before the video cut to black. That was what made Calder's breath stop cold. 2 silhouettes. Standing in the corner. Watching Reed. And one of them was the current warden of ADX Florence. The warden who never blinked. The video froze on the final frame, the grainy silhouettes sharp enough to erase any remaining doubt. Calder leaned closer, her pulse hammering. The warden of ADX Florence stood inside a room that officially did not exist, overseeing a man who was supposed to be dead. The second figure remained harder to identify, taller, shoulders squared, posture rigid enough to signal military training. But it wasn't the identities that chilled Calder. It was the way both men stared directly into the camera before the footage cut to black, as if they wanted the viewer to know they were there. Mercer exhaled slowly. If the warden is involved, this is bigger than an internal investigation. Calder nodded. This isn't punishment. This is experimentation. The flash drive held more. Dozens of notes, time-stamped during the inmate's time in C-Unit. Some logs were mundane, meal delivery, medical checks, security rounds. But others were more cryptic. Lines like, Subject 3 reached tolerance threshold, proceeding to Phase 4, or Visual hallucination induction successful, continue audio stimuli. One entry stood out more than the rest, Ellery approaching breaking point. Program leader recommends extension. Warden approved. Calder clenched her jaw. They weren't documenting mental decline. They were creating it. Mercer turned toward her. We need a warrant. They filed emergency paperwork with the U.S. District Court. Calder submitted the flash drive as evidence but flagged the video as classified to prevent it from leaking prematurely. The judge granted a temporary warrant for access to ADX but restricted it to non-invasive inspection until further evidence could justify a full search. It wasn't enough, but it was a start. Calder and Mercer drove back toward Florence with federal authorization, but halfway there Mercer's phone pinged. An email. No sender. No subject. Just a single attachment. A photo. Sprawled on a dirt road. Eyes open. Chest still. No visible wounds except a thin cut through the fabric near his ribs, precise, deliberate. Calder stared at the image, her breath tightening. Mercer's voice came out low. They found him. No message accompanied the image. No threat. No explanation. Just proof. Reed had been eliminated within hours of speaking to them. ADX's shadow was reaching far beyond its fences. Calder closed her eyes. This means we're next. When they reached ADX Florence, security met them at the front gate. The same guard as the night before. Young. Expressionless. Unmoving. Calder handed him the warrant. He glanced at it, then stepped aside without a word. Too quickly. Too calmly. The kind of reaction that doesn't come from obeying federal authority, but from expecting it. Inside, the silence felt unnatural. No echo of doors slamming. No distant voices. No movement from staff. It was as if the prison had been staged for their arrival. A lieutenant walked them through corridors that felt narrower than expected, the lights sharper, the cameras too perfectly angled. Calder noticed details she'd missed before. Small plates sealed into the walls, unmarked sensors, reinforced vents. Everything about the place felt engineered to watch, record, and control. When they reached the entrance to C-Unit, the lieutenant stopped. You're cleared to observe the cell block and common areas only. Basement access is restricted. Mercer stepped forward. There is no basement. The lieutenant didn't blink. Correct. Calder stared at him. Then what's beneath C-Unit? The lieutenant didn't move. Didn't flinch. Utilities. And the access door behind the east corridor? She asked. He didn't break eye contact. No such door exists. His tone carried an eerie certainty, as if he wasn't denying it, but reciting it. Calder leaned closer. Lieutenant, do you know what's been happening to inmates here? A subtle twitch ran along his jaw. Brief. Almost imperceptible. My role is to maintain order. That was when Calder saw it. His name tag. The last name was Hale. Victor Hale, the man who sent the flash drive, had mentioned something in his logs. A note scribbled almost frantically, they recruit the ones who adapt. The lieutenant walked 3 paces ahead before Calder spoke again, measured and calm. Lieutenant Hale, when did you start working here? He hesitated. Only for a heartbeat. But it was enough. I don't recall. Mercer's eyes widened. Calder stepped back, quietly placing her hand near her holster. Hale's posture stayed rigid, too rigid, his breathing too controlled, his gaze too empty. It was the same hollow look Reed had in the video. As they followed him deeper into the corridor, Calder whispered to Mercer, "He's not just a guard." Mercer replied, "No. He's one of the subjects." When they turned the next corner, the lights flickered, once, twice, then stabilized. Hale stopped walking. Calder's phone vibrated in her pocket. A text. Unknown number. You shouldn't have come inside. Calder froze. Slowly she lifted her head. Every camera in the hallway had turned to face her. And then Hale spoke, voice cold and precise. The warden is expecting you. The room where men are unmade. The words hung in the air like the click of a trigger. Calder and Mercer stood motionless as Lieutenant Hale turned toward them, his expression blank, his pupils unnaturally dilated. Calder had seen men under psychological strain before, but this was something different. This was conditioning, training, control. Mercer whispered, "He's leading us into a trap." Calder replied, "Then we go anyway. We need proof." Hale gestured for them to follow. His movements were deliberate, mechanical, as if each step was dictated by an unseen command. He led them through a narrow hallway that didn't appear on any blueprint. Low ceilings, reinforced walls, vents smaller than standard. Calder noticed something else. There were no cameras here. Not one. For the first time since entering the prison, the walls weren't watching. Hale stopped at a steel door marked with an unnumbered plate. No lock. No keypad. Just a palm scanner that hummed softly. "This is as far as you go," he said. Mercer stepped forward. "Open it." Hale didn't move. Calder lifted her badge. "By federal order, open the door." Hale slowly placed his hand on the scanner. The lock disengaged with a hiss. He stepped aside. Calder and Mercer entered. The door closed behind them. The room was cold. Silent. Empty except for a metal table, a chair, and a single monitor mounted on the wall. There was no warden. No guards. Just a screen that flickered to life with a burst of static. Then the image cleared. The warden sat behind a desk, hands folded, expression calm. His eyes had the same emptiness as Hale's, but beneath that calm was something calculating. Something aware. "Deputy Marshal Calder," he began. "You've made this more complicated than necessary." Calder stepped closer. "Where is the basement?" The warden offered a faint smile. "You're standing in it." Mercer scanned the walls. "This room isn't big enough for what we saw in the video." "Correct," the warden replied. "That room is not accessible without authorization. The program you're seeking is sealed. Classified. Beyond your jurisdiction." Calder's voice sharpened. "Reed is dead. Mendez is catatonic. Hale was tortured. And Ellery, what did you do to him?" The warden's eyes didn't change. "We observed." "Observed what?" Mercer demanded. The warden leaned back. "Human thresholds. Stress response. Isolation endurance. Psychological patterns under deprivation. The inmates selected were dangerous, unpredictable, and in many cases irredeemably violent. They were the ideal candidates." Calder stiffened. "You turned prisoners into experiments." "No," the warden corrected. "We turned them into data." Calder's hands curled into fists. "And the guards you conditioned?" "They volunteered," the warden said. "Most don't remember doing so. That is intentional." Mercer took a step forward, voice controlled. "We have enough to shut this entire facility down." The warden's faint smile returned. "You don't. In fact, the only evidence you possess is on a device that I suggest you check again." Calder immediately pulled the flash drive from her pocket. Her stomach dropped. It felt lighter. She opened it. Empty. Every file. Every video. Every note. Gone. The monitor flickered again. The warden leaned in. "You were never meant to succeed, Deputy Marshal. ADX Florence survives because America needs it to. There are things inside these walls the public can never know." The lights dimmed. A low alarm rumbled beneath the floor. Mercer whispered, "They're sealing the room." Calder grabbed his arm. "Look." A small vent near the ceiling began releasing a colorless vapor. The warden's voice echoed through hidden speakers. "This is not personal." Mercer moved toward the door, but Calder stopped him. "If this was a kill room, we'd already be dead. They want us unconscious." Mercer nodded. "Then we hold on as long as we can." Calder ripped off her jacket and pressed it over her mouth. The world blurred around the edges. Mercer's knees buckled. Calder felt her legs weakening. Through the haze, the monitor displayed one final message. "Case closed." Then everything went black. Calder awoke hours later in a hospital bed, an oxygen mask strapped to her face. Agents surrounded her. Mercer sat nearby, alive but groggy. A senior official stepped into the room and spoke without emotion. "There was no illegal basement. No classified program. You were exposed to a gas leak inside ADX during a routine inspection. Your investigation is terminated." Calder stared at him. "They wiped everything." Yes, the official replied. And you will not pursue this further. When he left, Mercer looked at Calder. What now? She exhaled slowly. We do what they don't expect. Which is? Calder stared at the ceiling, voice steady. We tell the story. Because there was one thing ADX Florence could never control. The truth whispered by the men who survived it. And the one who tried to stop it. If you think this story was intense, Calder murmured, they're not ready for the next one.